Divorced American man joins a female-only commune in eastern Russia. Then they all got pregnant. The first thing Elias knew was the ice. It was a living thing, a predator. It crawled up his jeans, seeped through the layers of his coat, and sank its teeth into his bones. His breath was a white ghost in the air, the only part of him that still seemed to have any life. He lay on his back, staring up at a sky the color of a dead man's Aja flat. Unforgiving gray that stretched into an eternity of nothing. Around him, Lake Baikal was a frozen desert, the ice groaning like a dying beast. He had been walking. For hours, or maybe days. The sun was a rumor, a distant memory from another life. This was it, he thought, a pathetic and profoundly lonely end for a man who had once lectured on the triumphant survival of extremophile organisms. Dr. Elias Vance, specialist in things that refuse to die, was about to freeze to death in the heart of Siberia. Then they appeared. Figures on the horizon, moving with a dreamlike slowness. They weren't men. He could tell by their gait, a certain rolling rhythm that spoke of endurance, not aggression. As they drew closer, their forms resolved into a dozen women, bundled in furs and wool, their faces raw from the wind. They moved in silence, their boots crunching a synchronized, hypnotic beat on the snow-dusted ice. They surrounded him, forming a perfect circle, their expressions unreadable, their eyes blue, gray, green, brown, all fixed on him with an unnerving collective intensity. No one spoke. No one offered a hand. They just watched, their own breath. Pluming in the frigid air, mingling with his, wasn't a rescue. It felt like an assessment. A tribunal. Chelius's teeth chattered, a frantic Morse code of surrender. A single question hammered in his skull, the last coherent thought before. The cold pulled him under. "Who are you?" He woke to the smell of wood smoke and dried herbs. The feeling was the first shock, not the biting cold, but a deep, penetrating warmth that made his skin ache. He was lying on a pallet of furs in a low-ceilinged room built of thick, dark logs. A massive stone stove, a pechka, dominated one wall, its heat radiating invisible waves. His wet clothes were gone, replaced by a loose-fitting linen shirt and woolen trousers. He was clean. Someone had washed him. The thought sent a jolt of intimate, disquieting shame through his body. He sat up, his muscles screaming in protest. The room was empty, but he felt 1,000 eyes on him, through a small, thick-glassed window. He saw nothing but a whirlwind of snow against an impenetrable forest of birch and pine. The door creaked open, and a woman entered. She was older than the others he'd seen, her face a roadmap of sun and hardship, but her spine was ramrod straight. She carried a wooden bowl of steaming broth that smelled of beets and dill. She set it down beside him without a word, her movements economical and precise. "Where am I?" Elias's voice was a dry rasp. The woman looked at him, her eyes a pale, watery blue. "Rodina Machushka," she said. Her voice was low, guttural. "The motherland mother. I was on the lake," he stammered. "My guide. There was an accident with the snowmobile." She gave a curt nod, as if this were a common and uninteresting story. "The lake takes men. Sometimes we give one back." She gestured to the soup. "Eat. You have been asleep for 2 days." He ate. The soup was thick, earthy, and scalded his throat, but with every spoonful, he felt life seeping back into his limbs. He was a biologist. He understood the process. His body was fighting its way back from the edge of hypothermia, but this felt different. It felt like he was being willfully resurrected. When he finished, the woman took the bowl. Her gaze was not unkind, but it was devoid of pity. It was the gaze of a farmer inspecting livestock. "Why did you help me?" he asked. She paused at the door. "We did not help you," she corrected, her voice flat. "We brought you here." There is a difference. The door closed, leaving him alone with the oppressive warmth and the 1,000 questions that now screamed louder than the wind. Outside, his old life felt like a poorly remembered film. Dr. Elias Vance, associate professor, his name on a handful of respectable but unexciting papers. A wife, Sarah, who had looked at him one evening over a dinner of takeout Thai food and said, with the clinical detachment of a surgeon delivering a terminal diagnosis, "I don't respect you." Eli, I look at you and I feel nothing. She'd left him for a man who founded a crypto trading app. A man with a jawline like a superhero and the moral compass of a shark. The divorce wasn't just a legal proceeding. It was an amputation of his identity. He had been a husband, a provider, in his modest way, a man. And in the space of a 10-minute conversation, he had become a failure. The shame was a physical thing. It sat in his gut, a cold, heavy stone. He'd lost his tenure-track position shortly after, his focus shattered, his lectures becoming rambling. Desperate pleas for his students to see the beauty and the resilience of tardigrades while his own life was falling apart. He'd cashed out his meager 401k, a final act of self-immolation, and bought a ticket to the most remote place he could think of. He told himself it was a research trip, a chance to study the unique ecosystem of Baikal, the world's oldest and deepest lake, but he knew it was a pilgrimage to the heart of oblivion. He was a specialist in extinction, and he had come to study his own. The days that followed his awakening were a blur of disorientation and grueling routine. The commune, Rodina Machushka, was home to 37 women. There were no men. No boys. The youngest was a teenager named Anya, with wide, startled eyes. The oldest was Irina, the woman who had first brought him soup, who seemed less a person and more a fixture of the landscape. They lived in a cluster of log cabins connected by cleared pathways, a tiny island of human endeavor in a vast and different wilderness. Their existence was a testament to relentless labor. They chopped wood, hauled water from a deep well, tended to a geothermal greenhouse that glowed in eerie green at night, mended nets, cured meats, and spoke in a clipped, functional Russian that left no room for pleasantries. Elias, the academic with soft hands and a mind full of useless facts, was utterly superfluous. They put him to work, and his ineptitude was a source of silent, constant humiliation. His axe strokes were clumsy, his knots were weak, his attempts to carry 2 buckets of water from the well left him winded and splashing icy water on his legs. The women would watch him, their faces impassive, and then one of them, usually a broad-shouldered woman named Katya, would take the tool from his hands and perform the task with an effortless, almost contemptuous grace. Katya's eyes held a particular fire, but the others regarded him with a kind of detached curiosity. She looked at him with something bordering on hostility. He was a flaw in their perfect, self-contained world. A weed in the garden, the culture shock was a physical blow. There was no privacy. The cabins were communal sleeping spaces filled with the soft sounds of women breathing in the dark. Meals were eaten in silence in a long hall, the only sounds the scraping of spoons on wooden bowls. They bathed together in a banya, a sweltering wooden sauna, where they would beat each other with birch branches until their skin was bright red. A ritual of purification and community that left him feeling exposed and utterly alien. In this world of women, his masculinity was not a source of power, but a strange, awkward appendage he didn't know what to do with. He was an anomaly, a specimen. The seduction of the place was as potent as its danger. It was in the profound healing silence, broken only by the wind and the crackle of fire. It was in the raw, unvarnished beauty of the women themselves, not a cosmetic beauty, but one forged from strength and purpose. It was in the way Lena, a woman with a gentle face and a long, pale braid, would sometimes hum ancient, mournful songs while she mended fishing nets, her voice a thread of impossible beauty in the harsh landscape. It was in the sense of absolute belonging they all shared, a bond so deep and unspoken it was like a shared bloodstream. He, who had never truly belonged anywhere, craved it like a starving man craves bread. He was a ghost in their machine, but he desperately wanted to become a cog. The ruler of this strange kingdom was Anushka. She wasn't the oldest, but she possessed an authority that was absolute and unquestioned. She had hair the color of iron, filings streaked with silver, and eyes so dark they seemed to drink the light. She moved with the lethal grace of a forest cat, and when she spoke, Everyone listened. She was the one who had founded Rodina Machushka 2 decades earlier, leading a small group of women away from the decaying post-Soviet towns where alcoholism, domestic violence, and despair were the air they breathed. She was their prophet, their protector, their queen. She summoned Elias to her private cabin one evening, a month after his arrival. The snow was falling thick and fast, muffling the world in a blanket of white. Her cabin was warmer than the others, filled with the scent of beeswax and strange, drying plants. She sat in a carved wooden chair, a wolf pelt draped over the back. She watched him for a long time, her dark eyes probing, searching for the cracks in his soul. "You are a learned man, Elias Vance," she began, her Russian slow and deliberate. "You study things that die, things that survive." He countered, his voice steadier than he felt. A faint smile touched her lips. "Survival. A beautiful word. We are survivors here. We fled a world that had no use for us, a world of broken men. We came here to build something new, something clean. You've succeeded," he said, and he meant it. "It's remarkable." "It is incomplete," she said, the words dropping into the silence like stones. "It is dying." Elias frowned. "Dying, but you're strong, self-sufficient." "We are 37 women," Anushka said, her voice dropping. To a near whisper, 10 years ago, we were 50. We grow old. We have no daughters. I've not seen a child born in this valley in 15 years. She leaned forward, the firelight catching the silver in her hair. "A community that does not create life is already a tomb. We are becoming ghosts, curators of a museum of our own making." The air in the small cabin grew thick, charged with a meaning he could not yet grasp. His biologist's mind clicked into gear. An isolated population, genetic bottleneck. Lack of his voice trailed off as he saw the look in her eyes. "Ow!" "This wasn't an academic problem. We have tried." Anushka continued, her voice raw. "We have brought men here before, 3 times. From the villages, from the hunting camps. Strong men. They took our food, our warmth. They gave us nothing. Sickness of the body or sickness of the spirit. One tried to make himself a king. We sent him away. Another brought the bottle sickness. We sent him away. The third, his seed, was barren." Elias felt a cold dread snaked its way up his spine. He was beginning to understand. The soup, the warm bed, the mending of his body, it wasn't charity. It was an investment. "You are not like them," Anushka said, her gaze pinning him to his chair. "You are not a strong man in the way of the body. You are weak. Your hands are soft. You chop wood like a child, but your mind is strong. Your body, it is from another world, clean, unspoiled by the poisons of our land." "What? What are you asking?" He whispered, though he already knew. Anushka stood and walked to the window, looking out at the swirling snow. "We are asking you to be the rain for our dry field, the river that floods the banks. We are asking you to give us what we cannot give ourselves." The proposition was so monstrous, so far outside the bounds of his world, that he almost laughed. It was insane. It was a eugenics program in a Siberian cult. His entire moral framework, the polite, liberal, Western code he had lived by, recoiled in horror. It was exploitation. It was a stud service. The shame he'd felt when Sarah left him was nothing compared to the hot, searing shame that flooded him now. But then, another feeling rose up, something dark and seductive. He thought of his empty, meaningless life back in America. The man who wasn't respected, the man who was nothing. Here he was being offered a purpose so profound, so primal, it defied all modern convention: to create life, to save a community from extinction, to be not just a man, but the man, the father, the source. It was a terrifying, irresistible temptation. The part of him that had felt castrated and useless felt a sudden, shocking surge of power. "You want me to? To sleep with all of you?" The words sounded clumsy, absurd. Anushka turned from the window. Her expression was not lustful. It was deadly serious, like a general planning a campaign. "Oh, This is not about the crude act of men. This is not about pleasure. This is a ritual, sacred duty. It is about survival. You will be the vessel, and we will be the soil. And together, we will ensure that Rodina Machushka does not fade into a story told by the wind. She laid out the terms, and each one was a hammer blow to his sense of self. It would not be a private act. It would be a ceremony, overseen by the elders. It would not be driven by his choice, but by theirs. They would choose him when their bodies were ready, when the stars were aligned according to their traditions. He would be revered, cared for, given the best food and the warmest furs. He would be a living symbol of hope, sacred instrument. And if I say no, he asked, his throat tight. Anushka's face softened for the first time, flicker of something that might have been empathy. Then you are a guest. You'll stay the winter, and when the ice on the lake breaks, we will give you supplies and show you the way back to the world, and we will slowly die. The choice was laid bare. He could cling to the tattered remnants of his old morality, the rules of a world that had discarded him, and in doing so, condemn these women to oblivion. Or he could surrender to their world, break every taboo he had ever known, and become something more than he had ever been. Looked into Anushka's ancient eyes and saw, not a seductress, but a desperate queen willing to do anything to save her people. He looked into his own heart and saw a man with nothing to lose and a terrifying, godlike purpose to gain. The reader inside him, the academic, the moralist, was screaming no, but the animal, the man, the failure who yearned to be essential, whispered a single damning word. Yes, the change was immediate and profound. The moment his consent was given, a quiet nod in Anushka's cabin that felt more like a vow. His status in the commune shifted. He was no longer the clumsy outsider, the charity. Casey was a resource, a treasure. He was moved from the communal sleeping quarters to a small, private cabin of his own, the one reserved for honored guests, or, he suspected, the sick and dying. He was given new clothes, lined with the soft fur of Arctic hares. He was excused. From the hard labor that had defined his first month, his new duty was to rest, to eat, to grow strong. The women, who had once ignored him or regarded him with suspicion, now averted their eyes when he passed, a gesture that felt like a mixture of reverence and something else he couldn't name. It was unsettling. He had gone from being invisible to being sacred, and both felt equally dehumanizing. The most dramatic shift was in his interactions with Katya. Her open hostility was replaced by a simmering, watchful silence. She was the one who often brought him his meals, rich stews, dark bread, fermented berry juice that was surprisingly potent. She would place the tray down, her movements stiff, her jaw tight, and leave without a word. He could feel her judgment, radiating off her like heat from the pechka. He was a cheat. He had taken the easy way out, accepting a pampered existence in exchange for a grotesque duty. While she and the others toiled to keep them all alive, her contempt was a constant. Unspoken accusation. One afternoon, he found her sharpening an axe by the woodpile, her breath pluming in the frigid air. The rhythmic shing-shing-shing of the whetstone was the only sound. He decided he couldn't bear the silence any longer. Katya.
Oh.
She didn't stop, didn't look up. What? I know what you think of me, he began, his voice sounding thin in the vast cold. Do you? She finally stopped, looking at the honed edge of the axe. I do not think you know anything about us. I know that you believe I've taken a coward's bargain. She finally turned her head, her eyes the color of a stormy sea fixing on him. A coward? No. A coward runs. You are a tool, a necessary one perhaps. Like this axe. We keep it sharp. We use it. We put it away. We do not ask its opinion. The cruelty of her words was like a slap. And that's all I am to you? A tool? That is what you agreed to be, she shot back, standing up, the axe held loosely in her hand. She was shorter than him, but she seemed to tower over him, her presence radiating a fierce, wounded pride. Do not pretend this is some grand romance, American. This is a transaction. You are the stud bull brought to the desperate herd. Do your job. Don't ask for our love. Her words should have hurt, but instead they ignited something in him. Spark of defiance in you. Are you just part of the herd? Do you have no say in this? A shadow passed over her face, a flicker of pain so deep it stole his breath. I do what is necessary for Rodina Machushka. We all do, eh? She turned her back on him and resumed sharpening the axe. The sound once again filling the air, a clear and final dismissal. He walked away, the cold in his heart now far worse than the cold in the air. He understood that Katya was not his enemy. She was the guardian of the commune's soul, and she believed he was about to corrupt it. The first ceremony took place on the night of the winter solstice. The sky was clear, ablaze with a billion stars and the shimmering, ethereal dance of the aurora borealis. The air was so cold it felt solid, a crystal that could shatter at the slightest sound. He was led by Irina and 2 other elders to the banya. This time, it wasn't a communal bath. It was a solemn, silent ritual. They washed him with melted snow and fragrant herbs, chanting in a low, ancient tongue. They dressed him in a simple white linen robe. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the slow, steady rhythm of their chanting. This felt wrong. Every nerve ending screamed sacrilege. It was a wedding, a funeral, and a sacrifice all at once. They led him to the long hall. It was lit only by dozens of beeswax candles, their light flickering on the faces of the 37 women. They were all there, dressed in their finest embroidered shirts, their hair braided with ribbons. They sat in perfect silence, there. Hands folded in their laps, Anushka stood before the cold hearth, her presence filling the room. At her feet, on a bed of pine boughs and wolf pelts, sat a young woman named Lena. It was Lena, the one with the gentle face and the beautiful singing voice. Eyes were wide, luminous in the candlelight, fixed on him. She looked terrified and resolute. This was the moment that would forever divide his life into a before and an after. Anushka spoke, her voice resonating in the hushed hall. She spoke not of lust or of men and women, but of the earth and the sky, the seed and the soil, the sacred duty to continue the chain of life. She spoke of the spirit of the bear, the strength of the wolf, the endurance of the birch tree. He was weaving a new mythology, and he was its central, unwilling character. He was guided to the pallet where Lena sat. He knelt before her as instructed. The eyes of 36 other women were on him, watching, witnessing. This was not an act of intimacy. It was a public performance of a biological necessity, wrapped in the robes of spirit. He looked into Lena's eyes and saw not desire but a profound, desperate hope. She reached out and touched his cheek, her hand trembling slightly. "It is a good thing you do," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "For all of us." In that moment, something inside him broke. The shame, the morality, the identity of Elias Vansett, all shattered. He was no longer a divorced American professor. He was a vessel, a force of nature, summoned to this remote corner of the world to perform a single, vital function. It was wrong. He knew it was wrong on a cellular level, a violation of the sacred private contract between 2 people. But as he leaned in to fulfill his duty, surrounded by the chanting of the elders and the silent, watchful gaze of an entire community, a part of him felt a surge of something terribly temptingly close to grace. He was erasing his own pathetic story and becoming a character in their epic. He wasn't just needed, he was essential. He was the answer to a prayer. It was the most profound and most profane moment of his life. The winter deepened, and so did the strange rhythm of his new existence. The ceremonies continued, dictated by the elders' arcane knowledge of cycles, lunar, seasonal, and biological. After Lena came others. Each time was the same and yet utterly different. It was never violent, never crude. It was always ritualistic, solemn, a duty performed under the watchful eyes of the community. He learned their names, their faces, the quiet stories held in their eyes. There was Alina, who had fled a husband who beat her, who touched Elias's hand with a gratitude that broke his heart. There was Sonia, barely 20, who had been orphaned when her village's fishing industry collapsed, and who looked at him with a simple, uncomplicated faith. He formed a strange, unspoken bond with them. In the daylight hours, they were distant, respectful. But in the candlelit intimacy of the long hall, in those moments of shared ritualized purpose, he saw their vulnerability, their hope, their fear. He was the instrument of their collective will, and the weight of it was immense. He was a secret shared by 37 women. His relationship with Katya remained the most fraught and the most real. The wall of her contempt began to show cracks. She still brought him his meals, but sometimes she would linger for a moment, her silence less hostile and more questioning. One day, she found him staring out his cabin window at the endless snow. "You look like a prisoner," she said, her voice unexpectedly soft. "Sometimes I feel like one," he admitted without turning. "You could have left, could I?" He turned to face her. "Live with the fact that I let you all fade away." "That is our fate. It's not your burden," she insisted. But her voice lacked its usual conviction. "It became my burden the moment you pulled me from the ice," he said. "You can't save a man's life and then expect him to not care if you live or die." She looked at him, her brow furrowed. "We're a strange man, American. You speak of caring. This is not about caring. This is about plumbing."
What?
Crude word was a defense, a way to rebuild the wall between them, but he wouldn't let her. "No, it's not. I see Lena's face every time I close my eyes. I hear Sonia's breathing. I feel Alina's hand on my cheek. Don't you dare tell me this is just plumbing. We're breaking ourselves to do this. All of us. Don't pretend it costs you nothing." Tears welled in Katya's eyes, shocking him. She fought them back, her jaw clenched. "It costs everything," she whispered, the words ragged. "My mother was one of the first to follow Anushka. She died here. She believed in this place. She believed in a world without the cruelty of men. And now we bring the fox into the henhouse and pray it only steals the eggs."
I'm
"Not a fox, Katya, aren't you?" she asked, her voice filled with a raw, aching sorrow. "You are changing us. The silence is different now. The way the women look at each other. There is hope, yes, but there is also jealousy. There is fear. You are the seed, but you are also the poison. The hope you bring will also be the thing that tears us apart." She left before he could answer, leaving him with the chilling accuracy of her prophecy. Had been so focused on his own moral struggle that he hadn't seen the subtle fractures appearing in the community's foundation. The women were bound by a shared purpose, but he was the singular object of that purpose. And in a world built on the principle of the collective, the singular is always a threat. The first sign came 2 months later. It was Lena. She had been listless for a week, and one morning she was sick. The elders, Irina and Anushka, took her into the healing cabin. A hush fell over the commune. The work continued, but the rhythm was broken, replaced by an anxious, waiting silence. Elias paced his cabin like a caged animal. He felt a terrifying, unfamiliar emotion, the anxiety of a father. That evening, Anushka came to him. Her face was serene, but her dark eyes burned with an intensity that singed the air. "Lena carries a child," she said. The words landed on him like a physical weight. A child. His child. He felt a dizzying mix of elation and pure terror. He had done it. He had fulfilled his purpose. He sank onto his cot, his head in his hands. Is she okay? "She is strong. The baby is strong," Anushka said. She sat beside him, her presence both comforting and unnerving. "This is the beginning, Elias. The first rain after the long drought." Within the next month, there were 3 more. Sonia, a quiet, middle-aged woman named Oksana, and then another. The sickness of early pregnancy became a common sight. Strange, joyful hysteria began to grip the commune. They had done it. They had cheated fate. The long silence would be broken by the cry of a newborn. Elias was no longer just a sacred instrument. He was a proven miracle worker. The women who were not yet pregnant looked at him with a new, hungry hope. But Katya's prophecy began to bloom like a dark flower. The pregnant women were grouped together, given lighter duties, special foods. A new hierarchy was forming. Resentment, subtle as a shadow, crept into the glances of those who had not yet been chosen for the ceremony, or for whom it had not yet been successful. The perfect, seamless collectivism of Rodina Machushka was developing seams. And at the center of it, All was Elias. He felt a growing, possessive pride that horrified him. He would find himself watching Lena, watching the slight swell of her belly, and a fierce, primal instinct would rise in him. My child. He wanted to protect her, to provide for her, to single her out for his care. It was the most natural feeling. In the world, and in the context of the Commune, the most destructive. The climax arrived on a day when the first hints of spring were in the air. The sun felt warm for the first time in months, and the edges of the snowbanks were beginning to weep. A celebration was declared. 9 women were now pregnant. 9. The number felt biblical, impossible. The Commune was saved. There was feasting and singing. Potent berry wine flowed freely. For the first time, Elias felt a true part of the celebration. He was toasted, honored. Anushka, her face glowing with triumph, called him the father of the new generation. Later. That evening, flushed with wine and a sense of dazed accomplishment, he found Katya by the well, staring up at the moon. She was one of the few who was not pregnant. Ceremony had been performed with her, a tense, silent affair that had felt more like a confrontation than a ritual. It had not taken. You should be celebrating, he said gently. She turned to him, her face pale in the moonlight. She wasn't angry. She looked broken. They're celebrating the end of our world, and they don't even know it. What are you talking about? This is a new beginning, he said. A beginning for them, she said, her hand resting on her flat stomach. The gesture was one of profound loss. But what happens next? American? When the children are born, what will they be told? Who is their father? Is it you? A single man? Or is it the community? Anushka says the children will belong to all of us. But I see the way Lena looks at you. I see the way you look at her. You are not a myth to her. You are the father of her child. He started, but he had no answer. And what of the children? Pressed, her voice rising with a desperate intensity. They will have your eyes, your hair. They will be different, and you will be here. A man, the only man, a king. The very thing Anushka brought us here to escape. You haven't saved us. You have just given us a new, more beautiful prison. The truth of her words hit him with the force of a physical blow. He saw the future she was painting, and it was clear as day. The jealousies, the factions, the concept of private ownership, of affection, of loyalty, of bloodlines creeping into their collectivist paradise. It was inevitable. His presence, his very maleness and fatherhood, would destroy the delicate ecosystem he had been brought here to save. A terrible, misguided idea began to form in his mind. Born of wine and a desperate egotistical desire to be a savior, he had to fix it. He had to prove her wrong. He had to save them from himself. He took her hands. They were cold. Katya, come with me. She stared at him, bewildered. What? When the ice breaks, come with me. Back to America. Said, the words tumbling out in a rush. I can take care of you. We can have a child there. A child that belongs to us. I can save you from this. I can give you a real life. He said it with a sense of noble sacrifice. He was offering her an escape. He was offering her the one thing he thought she truly wanted, a life, a family that was hers and hers alone. It was the ultimate expression of his Western, individualistic worldview. And it was the most unforgivable thing he could have possibly said. The look on her face was not one of gratitude. It was one of pure, unadulterated horror. She snatched her hands back as if he had burned her. Save me, she whispered, her voice trembling with a rage so profound it seemed to shake the very ground she stood on. You think this is what I want? To be your woman? To run away to your world? The world that broke you and sent you crawling. Here, she slapped him. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent night. You understand nothing? She cried, tears streaming down her face now. This is my home. These women are my soul. We don't need saving. We needed a future, and you. You think you can just buy us, choose us like fruit from a market? You're worse than all the others. They wanted our bodies. You want to steal our very soul. She turned and fled, her sobs echoing in the cold, clear air. Elias stood alone by the well, his cheeks stinging, the taste of wine and shame in his mouth. He had tried to be a hero, a redeemer. Instead, he had revealed himself to be the monster she always knew he was. He had offered to save one of them by destroying the foundation of everything they were. It was not a choice between redemption and ruin. He had chosen ruin and cloaked it in the language of love. He finally understood. He was the poison. And the only way to save the garden was to remove the weed, root and stem. The commune felt different the next day. The joy of the celebration had evaporated, replaced by a tense, heavy silence that was far more oppressive than the one that had greeted him upon his arrival. The women avoided his eyes. He saw them talking in hushed groups, their glances darting towards him, then away. Katya was nowhere to be seen. He knew what she must have told them. She had exposed his offer, his ultimate betrayal. It had proven that he saw them not as a collective, but as individuals to be claimed. He had tried to impose his world onto theirs. He was isolated in his cabin, a pariah once more. The good food still came, but it was left outside his door. He was a king in exile, his reign lasting less than a day. He spent 2 days in that suffocating solitude, the full weight of his catastrophic mistake crushing him. He hadn't just failed them, he had fundamentally misunderstood them. He had seen their need and mistaken it for weakness. On the evening of the second day, Anushka came to his cabin. She entered without knocking, her face as serene and implacable as a stone idol. She did not look angry. She looked disappointed. "Katya told us of your offer," she said, her voice calm. Elias couldn't meet her eyes. He stared at the floorboards. "It was a mistake. I was drunk. I wanted to help. You wanted to own." Anushka corrected gently. "It's the way of your world. You see a beautiful thing, and your first instinct is not to admire it, but to possess it. You see a community, and you wish to turn it into a family with you at its head. It is not your fault. It is the nature of the beast." He looked up, a desperate plea in his eyes. "I can fix this. I can. I can leave. As soon as the lake is passable, I'll go. I will disappear. I'll be the myth you wanted." Anushka gave him that same faint smile he remembered from their first meeting. "It is no longer that simple, Elias. You are not a myth. You are real. You live and breathe. As long as you exist in the world, you are a destination, a temptation. What is to stop a daughter in 20 years from wanting to seek out her mysterious father in America? What is to stop the stories from becoming a search? You have planted a garden for us, but you have also planted a compass that points away from Rodina Machushka. Our children must belong only to this place. Their origin cannot be a man. It must be a story." A chilling, horrifying realization began to dawn on Elias. The cold dread from their first conversation returned, 1,000 times stronger. He was a loose end, a narrative flaw in the epic she was writing. "What are you saying?" he whispered, his body gone cold. "The greatest gift a father can give his children," Anushka said, her voice hypnotic, almost soothing, "is a heroic story, a legend. Men go to war and die for their children's freedom. They sacrifice themselves to save their families. Their death gives their life its ultimate meaning." This was it, the twist. The final terrible piece of the ritual he had never been told about. The stud bull isn't just put out to pasture. He is slaughtered and eaten at the harvest feast. His purpose wasn't just to create life. It was to complete the new mythology with his own disappearance. He was the seed that plants the tree and then must rot in the ground to nourish it. He wasn't brought here to live with them, was brought here to die for them. "You're going to kill me," he said, the words flat, devoid of emotion. He was looking at it now with the detached clarity of a biologist observing a brutal but necessary natural law. The praying mantis devouring her mate. It was horrifying, but it made a terrible perfect sense. Anushka's expression did not change. "We are not murderers, Elias. We are midwives. We help life into the world. Sometimes we help a soul to its next journey. The father of our new world cannot be a weak, divorced American professor full of shame. He must be a spirit. A hero who came from the ice, gave the gift of life, and returned to the heart of the lake from whence he came, spirit of the water. By Cole gave you to us, we must give you back. She stood. Tomorrow at dawn, walk out onto the lake, towards the center. Do not look back. It is the only way to fix what you have broken. It is the only way for your story and ours to be clean. She was offering him a choice, but it was the illusion of one. He could refuse, fight. They would overpower him. His end would be ugly, violent, a struggle. It would taint the story, turn their creation myth into a sordid crime. Or he could walk. He could accept his role, perform this final act of his own free will. He could make his death a sacrifice instead of an execution. He could, in his final moments, become the hero they needed him to be. He looked past Anushka through the small window. The moon was high and bright, illuminating a world of impossible white beauty. He thought of the children, his children. 9 of them. They would be born into this strange, harsh, beautiful world. They would grow up strong and free. They would know the songs of Lena, the fierce pride of Katya, the wisdom of Anushka. They would never know him. They would only know the legend of the man from the ice, a man who loved them enough to disappear forever. Was it the ultimate act of cruelty or the ultimate act of love? He was left alone. The silence in the cabin was absolute. He thought of his life before, the desperate scramble for respect, the hollow ache of failure. It all seemed so small now, so meaningless. He'd come here seeking oblivion, and he had found it, but not in the way he had imagined. He'd found a purpose so vast it required his complete annihilation. As the first gray light of dawn seeped into the sky, Elias Vance walked out of his cabin. He was dressed in the simple linen and wool they had given him. He didn't look towards the other cabins. He didn't want to see if anyone was watching. He walked past the well, past the woodpile, onto the shore of the great frozen lake. Ice stretched out before him, a vast, white plain under a violet sky. The air was still, the cold so profound it felt sacred. He took a first step, the crunch of his boot unnaturally loud, started walking, heading for the center of the lake, towards the horizon that was slowly blushing with the promise of a sun it would take hours to deliver. He did not look back. He just walked. He wondered if this was what it felt like to be a god, walking into your own myth. Or was this what it felt like to be a fool, walking to an unmarked frozen grave? He didn't know. And as he grew smaller and smaller against the vastness of the ice, silhouette dissolving into the white light of the rising sun, he knew that no one would ever know. Back on the shore, hidden in the shadows of the cabins, 37 women stood in silence. 9 of them had their hands resting on their bellies. They watched until he was completely gone. They did not weep. They simply watched, their faces turned towards the dawn, waiting for their new world to be born.